You are listening to the Postcast presented by the Locked On Senators podcast and the Glebe Central Pub. The Glebe Central Pub is your neighborhood pub in the heart of the Glebe. Go visit them for tasty food, cold drinks, and an unreal atmosphere. We had citizens texting us tonight saying they were at the Glebe Central Pub and they were enjoying themselves. Well, I got that one before the game started. The Senators lose tonight 5-1 in Calgary, and we are here to put a bow on it. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Piller, and we have Jack Richardson joining us tonight in the Postcast. We'll get into the good, positive Pilsy, hopefully a spin on it, the bad and the ugly. Pilsy, take me through your emotions watching this one, another late night affair.
Ross, I knew this game was going down the tube as soon as another shorthanded goal was scored on these Ottawa Senators. I mean, those are back-breaking goals where at the very least you're hoping to get some momentum, and instead you get less momentum and you give the Flames a huge boost to start things off. So this was yet again another disappointing loss, as I wasn't really chalking this one up as one that the Sens would easily win, but I was hoping for a much more competitive effort, and we didn't get that.
We did not get it. It started early and it came often. Calgary scored 3 times in the first, although the first was called back, a shorty and a power play goal. And right after Tim Stützle gave the Sens a glimmer of hope, it was taken away the next shift. Jonathan Huberdeau. Jack, did you believe when Timmy got that gimme that there was a light at the end of the tunnel?
I didn't really have belief. Like that's the bounce that they weren't getting in like the Seattle game, and we were kind of complaining. It was they're getting, Seattle's getting all these lucky bounces. Like that's literally a gift. So other than that, they created absolutely nothing offensively. When you this is basically the Chicago game all over again. So I had no faith. I don't know what you guys.
Bills.
I don't want to hear this is the Chicago game all over again, Jack. I'm trying to get that therapeutically out of my system here, but it's hard for me to disagree with you. I think, again, the Ottawa Senators had a decent start. Brady had a really good opportunity to start this game off. Nice little backhand deke off a feed from Timmy, but they cannot score first. They always get the best chance right away. We mentioned Giroux hitting the post a couple times early in these last couple games, but if those could go in and you get a spark and you get a bit of hope to start the game off, I think it gives the Sens a boost, but they're not able to get that, and they're on their heels so often recently that they're just getting gassed, especially when you're on a Western road trip like this.
I have 2 of my first 4 notes are posts hit from the Calgary Flames. And then my 5th note is their goal that was called back from an offside that had no direct relation to the goal. One of those where, sure, rewind it if you want, but I could see the argument for maybe a 30-second rule. If the goal doesn't happen 30 seconds after the offside, I mean, where do you draw the line? But they caught a break there, and I was hoping they could catch some momentum. It just didn't come. They take a penalty, 3 seconds after the overturned goal. Gambrell sits down. I thought Mando played as well as he could tonight. Again, so many odd man rushes. It seems like you mentioned the shorthanded goal. It was every power play they had in this game, of which they had quite a few. 0 for 4, the Senators go on the power play. They give up an odd man rush on every single one. They tried to make a couple lineup moves, but no real substance. They moved Shabbat over to one of the shooting positions on the top unit and slide Chikrin up top, which was something that we were advocating for. But Pilsy, was that enough? Or were you hoping to see the Giroux move or maybe another personnel change on the power play?
It was nice to see something, Ross, but are we looking at Thomas Chabot and being like, we got to put this guy in a position to shoot more?
No.
Not really. So that was kind of a weird move for me. One move I did like, though, later on in the game, Ross, is Mark Kastelik got some time on the power play unit, and he actually won a faceoff later on. I think he played with both units, maybe a little bit, if I'm remembering correctly, because he had over a minute on the power play. I think it was just that one opportunity. But, hey, he was hot on the draw, 60% tonight. So if you're DJ Smith and your power plays aren't clicking, well, there's one thing you can try to do. Just win the face-off and hope that that possession can do something for you. You got to set the bar low, and that's where he was looking. So he turns to his fourth-line center. So I thought that was an okay move near the end of the game when kind of all hope is lost. At least there's some sense to it. But the Shabbat sliding over, that didn't really do it for me, Ross.
No, it didn't do it for me either. And the Senators still, the offer on the power play. This streak has now reached 6 straight games without a power play goal, and they didn't convert on their final 2 power plays against Detroit. So they're on just a run of futility right now, where they've allowed a power play goal now in back-to-back games, and you're just wondering where does rock bottom hit, and where do they go from here? They're going to be a substantial, maybe like change in strategy. I don't know. I'm just waiting for something to happen. And DJ said before the game that you're just one shot away from changing it. So I think he's of the mind that you just keep with it, grind it out. Kind of like his strategy on the forecheck, where you just keep dumping and chasing it, and you're gonna eventually separate the body from the puck. You're gonna make a play, and it's gonna be in the back of the net like that. So I don't know where they go from here. Jack, where are you at with the power play that's like on an 0 for 18 run right now?
It stinks, man. It's awful. I think the shorthanded goal today, there's a shot, the camera angle from behind the net. It shows what the problem is. There's a 3-on-2, or it's a 2-on-3, I guess, for the Flames, right? They've got 3 guys back for the Sens. The other 2 forwards, I don't know who was on the ice at the time, especially, but they're hanging out at the blue line because technically the Sens have numbers. But Rasmus Anderson, the eventual goal scorer, a defenseman scoring a shorthanded goal against you off the rush, that's a problem. He's booking it down the ice to join the rush and make it a 3-on-3. You have to book it back with him. You learn this in minor hockey, that the mentality on a power play is to outman them every single time in every single puck battle, like overload the puck. And the Sens aren't doing that in transition. They're cherry picking. And it bothers me that Brady Tkachuk is the guy who a week ago was saying we were cheating for offense. Pillsy, remember we were on the postcast, and I was like praising his quotes, being like, that's great. I love what he was saying, and like that's the captain right there. But he's one of the ones doing it still a week later, and they lost 3 or 4 now after being hot. So I don't know. It's so frustrating watching that, because you can blame the D, you can blame the structure, but why aren't they back checking hard? I don't understand.
Well, and one kind of example to allude to on that is Brady's little behind the back feed to absolutely nobody at the end. And at that point, it's 4-1. It's not like it's a big moment in the game, but you're like, this is a prime example of what's wrong with the team right now. There's no cohesion, and there's no multiple good plays in a row. It just feels like a grenade on somebody's stick before they get to a shooting area or somewhere where they can score. I mean, they're outshot tonight by 38-31, 39. They gave the Flames an extra one at the end. So 39-31. Billsy, what now?
Well, now they go to Edmonton, the toughest challenge of this Western Canadian swing. I think that's fair to say, especially the Ottawa Senators are getting destroyed by Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid seemingly every time they play. So, Ross, I was hoping to kind of get a 1-1-1 record on this trip. Maybe you take Vancouver to overtime, maybe you lose to Edmonton and you get a win against Calgary or something like that. But now it's seemingly pretty clear that this team is going to have a tough time already on a deep road trip and up against 2 of the best players in the league. I don't know how they have any sort of chance here, because Edmonton's fighting for playoff seeding here, and they weren't even able to beat the weaker teams. So I don't know what happens here, Ross. It's not looking good. Like, this team needs to come home bad.
The only spin zone I can put on it is their only win on this road trip was against the best team they've played in Seattle. They've lost to the 3 bad ones, the Chicago, the Vancouver, and now the Calgary Flames. They fall by a score of 5-1. Coming up, we'll get into the game summary, a couple news and notes from us, and then our Send Central standouts. But as always, the Postcast is brought to you by the Glebe Central Pub. They're in the heart of the Glebe at 779 Bank Street. And when you go, make sure you let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. You can go any day and have a great time. But how about St. Paddy's Day? You can't spell pub without pub on St. Paddy's Day being the prime example of what they're all about. And this year, the Glebe Central Pub has live music all day. They are going to be a blast. I wish I was able to get there. Maybe next year we'll make our way down for the Glebe Central Pub. Grab a Guinness and kiss your neighbor, as an Irishman would. Go have some fun with a great atmosphere down at the Glebe Central Pub. Find them at 779 Bank Street, and make sure you let them know that Locked On Senators sent you.
This episode is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in North America. That's where I go to make all my sports bets on the Sens and any other sports because they got it all. They are the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, and you guys have to check out the app. I love the app. It's simple, safe, secure, easy to use. They've got lots of different bets, whether it's money line, puck line, player props, point spreads, whatever you like, shots on goal, whatever it is, you can find it at the FanDuel app. So check it out at fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
You're watching the Postcast, all you sickos out there, as the clock passes midnight with a weird one. And not only for the Senators moving east from west, where you lose an hour already, then losing an extra hour with daylight saving. Second game of back-to-back. I know I sound like I'm making excuses for this team, but a strange game, and it felt that way on the ice, where they had a couple pushes. Pillsy, you mentioned that Brady Tkachuk moment early on in the game where he gets stopped. That Stützle pass, come on. And Mando, my last note before he let in the first goal was he's looking calm. Like, he doesn't look like a guy who played East Coast League games this year. Really happy with Mando, but then you look at the end, just like we talked about Sogard's numbers the last few games, where it's like, it's not really indicative of how he's played or how confident he's given his team a chance to win. We also kind of buried the lead here. Thomas Chabot left the game in the third period, did not return. Mathieu Joseph left the game in the first period and did not return. So a short bench to add to it. But at the end of the day, you're just hoping that going forward that's not serious injuries for those guys as well. DJ Smith also made lineup changes going into tonight's game. Eric Brandstrom in, and he took out Nick Holden. And then up front, Julien Gauthier came in for Patrick Brown. Pillsy, did you like those moves? What did you think of that going into this game before we get into the summary?
Yeah, I definitely like those moves, especially coming off a bad loss in Vancouver. Second half of a back-to-back, I think it's good to get fresh legs in there. And Julien Gauthier, I thought, had a decent game. He gets yet again another breakaway showing his size and speed. But just like the New York Rangers fans warned us, this is a guy that gets a lot of opportunities but just can't seem to finish, which is unfortunate there. And then Brandy, I thought, had a decent game, not his best game, but he's also playing with Hamonic, someone that he's not really used to playing with. But I think it was good to try at least to get Brandy in because he hadn't done anything to deserve being outside of this lineup. So to answer your question, yeah, I like the changes, and I don't think they're a big reason why this team wasn't able to have success tonight. I think you mentioned it. Those two injuries and having a shorter bench when you're already down, that's really tough to make a big push for a comeback here, especially on the road.
I don't think I want to get into like a goal by goal breakdown. Like, we know they got absolutely dummied in this game. Like we talked, there were highlight reel goals scored. There were goals where you're just kind of like, all right, sure. You can just snap it home and the momentum changes the other way. But Jack brought up a great graph here that these game scores, maybe Jack, as I pull this up, you can let people know kind of how these are brought together. Cause to me, it just looks like tabs, but clearly there's a method to the madness. And you look at kind of who the best and worst players are by a game score perspective. And tonight it was not the players you necessarily want to see at the top when the team's going to have success.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily understand what game score means. I like these graphs from hockey stat cards there at the top right. I think they usually translate to what I'm seeing when I'm watching the games. Like there's never really any surprises, I would say. So the dark blue there, we see Zub at the bottom. That's defense, so not a good defensive night. And then the light blue or darker blue, I guess, is offense. So clearly, like what this shows to me is that the Flames were carrying most of the possession, most of the game. And it just means that when those guys, I guess, were on the ice, that they were being caved in, essentially. Because this is like one of the worst I've seen, I think, for the Sens. And you're right, when those guys are up top, it's not good. But when the bottom of the graph with the names that are on the bottom looks like that, like it's your top defense pair essentially being down there, your top goal scorer right now, and then like that's not good. So I just wanted to point that out a little bit. It's just I like looking at those after wins, even just being like, hey, how did this guy do? Just in terms of the analytics, but usually it matches the eye test, and I would say that this is pretty accurate with what I saw. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Artem Zub had a bit of a tough night, and I did think that Mark Kaslik had a good night. And we just mentioned Julien Gauthier and Eric Brandstrom; those are the guys up at the top there. So if those guys are your best players statistically, you're probably not going to beat a team that scores 5 goals on you. Let's just be honest. So I think that's clear why the Ottawa Senators weren't able to get things going. We already mentioned it's a tough game for Brady Tkachuk here as he doesn't hit his usual shots over. He has a terrible pass. I thought he wasn't really playing with that kind of bring your team into the battle type attitude as he usually does. So that's tough as well. And then Alex DeBrincat, he's really been struggling lately. And I know we've done the spin
Might have been
zone.
his worst game. Might have been his worst game of the season. I think he was just awful tonight. I don't know.
It was tough. We've tried to do the spin zone of, well, he's not scoring like we'd want, but he's making up with it by being a playmaker, clicking on the power play, having some decent plays defensively. But all of those have kind of dried up, and now that line, especially, is becoming more and more of a liability. Shift in and shift out.
Well, Shane Pinto got benched in the second period after his giveaway led to a 2-on-1 goal. I believe that was Huberto's, where again, like, you kind of have to tip your hat for the skill of being able to hand-eye, just whack it in, but you're giving up a 2-on-1 to start it all. So that part is what you'd hope could be controlled. Sean mentions he was boots on the ground at the Saddle Dome tonight. Love making this type of connection too when people are jumping on the postcast after. We appreciate everyone who comes in and hangs out with us after games, but that's super cool to have that connection right to the game. And it reminded me of my feelings after being at the game in December in Winnipeg. So the Senators just continue to be absolutely brutal in Western Canada this year. The Winnipeg obviously was before Christmas. They lose 5-1. But now on this trip, 5-2 to Vancouver and 5-1 to the Calgary Flames. Pilsy, I'm going to ask you the hardest question I might ever have for you.
Oh, boy.
Who is your number one Sens Central standout in this game?
It is tough, but I'm glad you threw it to me first because I really only have one here, and I've kind of already highlighted his game, so a bit of a spoiler. But I thought Mark Kaslick had a decent game for what he needed to do. He's 60% from the dot. Like I mentioned, DJ Smith is giving him power play time and allowing him to be the guy of all players on this team to take draws in the offensive zone on the power play. He had a couple shots on goal, 3 shots on goal. And I thought he played a decent game. He was in the mix there. And from the fancy stats, from what my little brain can comprehend, it seemed like he was at the top. So he was doing good there. So Mark Kaslick is my Sen Central standout presented by the Glebe Central Pub.
I got Batherson. And
okay.
I thought that based on how he's played this season, I think it was a really good effort from him. I know DJ praised him against Seattle, and people were kind of surprised about that one. But I just liked the way he was moving his feet. I thought he was getting pucks to the net. Probably had the better chances of anyone that I can think about. But I don't know. It's hard. Like it was a tough game for everyone. But a couple nice plays he made. It might not have been an overall good game for him, but he cut to the net early in the first on the power play and made some stuff happen there. So I like Drake Batherson tonight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he had one of his better games, especially of late as well. I'm having trouble picking, guys, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. And that's kind of a telltale of how the game went. Part of me wants to give credit to the young goalie for standing in there.
Yeah.
Didn't really get much help, but at the end of the day, I don't know if he stood out in the game, but certainly against who's left to choose from, I'll give it to Mando because tough spots, second half back to back feels like every game he plays is that. Right, the Boston game was the schedule loss, and then he played that Islanders game where he was fantastic and got his first NHL win. So I'll take and Mando did actually give to Foley a bit of a how'd he do behind the net. So I did like that from Mando. So we'll get that as his secondary reasoning for being a Sen Central standout tonight. And the setup still looks phenomenal. He looks great out there. How about the eye drill he was doing pregame? That was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, goalies are absolute weirdos. That is confirmed. But Ross, he was doing it with like a vengeful, like sort of scowl to him, and he just looked like he literally looked like he was on the dark side in Star Wars. Like he was.
I want to give a shout out to the one that I saw. Damn. Okay, if I can find it and give credit, I will. But
I think there was a side by side of him and Anakin, and it looked pretty legit.
Oh, I just actually see that one. That one's at Julio Hashem on
yes,
Twitter. But the other one I saw, I wish I give credit. If it's yours, credit to you. but it was one where it was like, when I see the waiter walk in, I think it's my food, but they walk just like the follow. I thought that was
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's good.
A little levity after tonight's game that was just brutal to watch on all accounts. It sucks when you stay up late. It sucks when you stay up late 10 times worse when the third period doesn't matter. And that's back-to-back nights where you get to the third and it's cradle at home if you're the Calgary Flames. So next up Tuesday, Jack, you got a key to victory for us for that game Tuesday against Edmonton. What's something that you've been seeing with this team that you need to see corrected quick? Maybe except for the power play, because we touched on that.
Just back checking. I touched on it a little bit too, but I just need more effort from the forwards defensively, and that's been my thing all season. I pointed it out a lot in November. Again, I love Brady Tkachuk, and I think personally, I've been so hard on Thomas Chabot, and like rightfully so, maybe not rightfully so. I don't know. I've just been analyzing him a lot. I think defensively, but the forwards have to help out, and they're not doing it right now. I saw a clip today during the Devils game of them. It was like a 5-second clip maybe or something like that. The way they move as a 5-man unit in the defensive zone to like retrieve pucks, it's remarkable. So like that it's easier said than done, but they have the personnel to do it. And yeah, it's on coaching, but the coach can't go out there and skate for the players. So I really don't believe that DJ Smith is telling the guys not to back check. I would imagine it's the opposite. So that's what I want to see. I just want to see more of an effort like we were seeing in that 5-game win streak. They were playing at both ends of the ice really well. And I just want to see more of that against Edmonton. And you have to with McDavid, who's, one of the best goal scorer this season. He's the best player on the planet. You have to be able to back check against him, especially with all his speed.
The Ottawa Senators were 4-1 in meaningful games, as we've coined, and that record can just get crumpled up and thrown in the garbage now. Hey, Pilsy?
Yeah, I mean, they've really squandered it away with of Chicago, Calgary, Vancouver. They needed to win 2 of those games, in my opinion. So dropping all 3 of them is the math is, we're not math guys, Ross, thankfully. Otherwise, I would be smarter and realize that this is looking bleaker than it is, but it's not looking good. That's for sure.
You have an opportunity each game to make your own destiny. And I think at this point, you just take it one game at a time, enjoy what offense has been brought in certain situations, and hope the defense can improve. And I saw someone on Twitter as well say, like, if a silver lining here is not squeezing into the playoffs, like a false sense of having a real step in progression, if that's making a couple changes that I think everyone under the surface might know need to happen for them to become that next step in what they're trying to build, then maybe it's worth it. But obviously you don't want to see them get rolled over in every single one of these meaningful games.
I think, Ross, you can have that spin zone if you have your first round pick, because then you're like, we get a boost in the first round pick
or your second or your third.
I wasn't gonna go that far, but yeah, that's a good point. Because when you don't really have that as a reward for not making the playoffs, I'd honestly rather the Sens make the playoffs and get swept by the Bruins. It's still good experience for these kids. It still gives them a little taste of what they want. So with no first round pick, lottery odds, or improved draft position, I'm not feeling that spin zone, unfortunately. I appreciate people trying to get some positivity out of it, but it's not hitting me.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Jack, are you going to chime in on that?
Yeah, and I was going to make it worse. I was going to negative spins on it. So, the thought of changes is with new ownership, right? And that's probably going to be the case in some capacity. But with the way these bids have kind of taken a little bit longer than expected, isn't the estimated time maybe around July 1st? The league wants it done by July 1st. Most coaching changes happen in May if you don't make the playoffs, because then all the good coaches are going to be gone.
Fair.
So, who are you replacing him with? That's obviously going to be the $1 million question this offseason if they do it. So, I don't know. I'm not that I'm down. Obviously, I think making changes in the summer is necessary. It might have to be Pierre Dorion who does it, because I don't know if ownership's going to take over in time for them to make a change before all the coaches are gone.
Well, interestingly enough, the draft is going to be back in June this year. So if July 1st, you got to wonder, because obviously so much action happens around the draft. And if people think, if maybe you're new listener to Locked On Senators, you think we take time off in the summer, you're absolutely nuts. This is where we make our mark here with your daily home for Ottawa Senators content, whether they're on a 5-game winning streak as they were, or whether they lose for the third time in 4 games on the road against another team that's on the outside looking in of the playoff picture. Jack, I want your final thoughts on this one. Sum it all up for me. And we already know kind of you're thinking back check at the power play going on Tuesday, but I need a confidence level in terms of finishing the trip strong.
You know what? I'll spin zone it. I'll make it positive. I can see them finishing this trip strong, making it 2 of 5 games. They take the points in, and like you mentioned, they beat the Kraken. They go in and they beat the Oilers. Those are the 2 best teams on the trip. That'll give me some hope, which might not be good for this incredibly difficult stretch they have coming up, which actually starts with this game on Tuesday against Edmonton, because it goes Edmonton, Colorado, Toronto, in Ottawa against the Leafs, by the way, on Saturday, and then the Devils, the Bruins, the Hurricanes.
Next, Jack is back-to-back up against Pittsburgh, Boston, both on the road.
Oh, perfect. Here we go. This is just a joke. It's a joke that we got screwed. So it's tough, but there's against Pittsburgh and Florida on back-to-back Tuesday or Monday nights, the 20th and 27th. Those are huge games. If you can kind of stay afloat, get a couple points here and there, you have to win those games regardless. So if they can win on Tuesday, I'll be a bit more confident about this difficult stretch, because I hate looking at that. That's brutal.
This is tough. Sens going into tonight had one of the best records, though, in the second half of a back-to-back. I found that interesting. 6-3 going into tonight's game, second half back-to-back. So still over 500, second half of the next back-to-back at Boston. Now, that didn't go so well last time.
I will say the only thing, so that's part of it too. If let's say they make the playoffs and they sneak in, and you look at the record against the Bruins and it's, they lost both in Boston, you got to take one eventually. Both the games against Boston this year are the second half of a back-to-back. I also look at this stretch, half of the games are at home, and they're a much better team at home. So you can spin it a different way if you'd like. It's evenly split a little bit, one back-to-back, time to rest. I like them against the Leafs. Haven't really seen much of Tampa or Florida, right? But it's not as bad as I thought. It just sucks that they didn't get the points when they should have this weekend, especially because they were on the board.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. Ross, do we want to do a quick standings update before we head? Just take a look at the picture here.
Yeah, sounds good. Why don't we do that? Because we're obviously finished for the day with Ottawa being out in the mountains. Out east today, Pittsburgh got the win. Yeah. I think that they're a pipe dream now. Now there's one spot, and you got the Islanders, the Panthers, the Capitals, the Sens, and I mean, if we're gonna keep saying the Sens, then now we have to include Buffalo back in the mix. Now that the Senators lost tonight, their points percentage has fallen below Buffalo for the first time in the last, I'd say, week and a bit. So here we go, the standings in the Eastern Conference wildcard race. We're going to pull up, and we're going to be waiting tomorrow. And by the way, we also want to note that tomorrow's Locked On Senators will be out a little bit later on. Probably should have said that before half an hour in, but we're going to record around 5 p.m. Some things came up, but obviously you got the postcast in the meantime, 5 p.m., and we are going to be announcing the winner of the 2 tickets, 100 level, to Sens Avalanche on this Thursday, when the Sens return home from their road trip. All right, Pilsy, I'm glad we covered Detroit, but where do you want to walk through here with the standings?
I mean, you got to look at where Ottawa is, 70 points. The New York Islanders have 76, and the Penguins have 78. Now, we can still spin zone those games in hand, Ross, but 2 games in hand. If the Sens win both of those, still, that only brings them up to 74, so that's still not enough to make that push there. And I still think Washington is going to have a fall here, but Florida seems to be in this fight a little bit more than Ottawa, even though their roster isn't that strong in my opinion, but they're hanging on here. So I think it's looking really, really difficult for the Sens to even I think at best now, Ross, we're continuing to look at the new adjustment to expectations. At least I made a little while ago was 4th in the Atlantic would be a successful season for me. If you can finish ahead of Florida and Buffalo here and just miss the playoffs, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. I believe that's something that came up when we were putting our expectations before the season, where if you're fourth in the Atlantic and you're ahead of Buffalo and Detroit, the two teams that we spend all summer comparing rebuilds with, then you're looking like maybe you peak when it makes sense to peak, as well as you said. Like there is value to an extent, but Boston is just on a whole different level. The Bruins and even the Hurricanes,
They've
Leafs,
already
like
clinched Boston. Like, that's insane.
that is wild. With all, yeah, you got the X next to them there. Wow, 65 games, 50 wins on the season. Absolutely sickening behavior by the Boston Bruins. But the Senators, yeah, right in the mix of that goal differential. The only one in the red here of the teams that are. What do you say, Pilsy? Hanging on. So we went from sniffing around to in the fight to in the hunt.
Yeah, sniffing around to in the hunt to hanging around. The Sens are hanging around now.
They're hanging around. Nothing a win can't fix. This busy stretch continues Tuesday in Edmonton. Pills, you want to leave us with some final thoughts?
Final thoughts are this team needs home cooking. Like, I've already kind of conceded to Edmonton. I would love to give you guys positive Pillsy, but it's not looking good. This team sucks on the road, and especially I think going into Edmonton with McDavid and Draisaitl, not going to be good. So I'm looking at getting better at home. That game up against the Leafs on the 18th is going to be huge. They need to win all their home games this month to do better than hanging around. Like, if they want to be sniffing or in the hunt, they need to get all those home wins. So if you're going to lose, there's an old saying, I forget who said it, but Elliot Friedman always mentions it. If you're going to stink on the road. So that's fine. Give the people at the CTC, the good people of Ottawa, Ontario, something to cheer for when you're back home.
Pilsy, how about I tell you the only time the Sens have lost at home since they last played Edmonton on February 11th was right in front of you and me, buddy. So the Ottawa Senators are 4-0-1 in their last 5 home games. 5-0-1 dating back to their last game against the Edmonton Oilers, a 6-3 loss. Tuesday, they'll have a chance to beat the Edmonton Oilers on the road, just like they did last year. A multi-goal third period comeback, the Gambrelment game, where Josh Norris scored on the power play wearing Dylan Gambrell's helmet after losing his own. Great moment there. Hopefully they have a chance to do it again. But for tonight, we say goodbye. Let's get some Go Sens Go in the chat. Obviously, a tough road trip. West Coast games, man. Let's not have those at the same weekend as daylight savings next year. That should be a goal here. What's great, though, is that whenever you're feeling down or you're feeling hungry, you can always head to the Glebe Central Pub. The Postcast is brought to you by the Glebe Central Pub. You can check them out at 779 Bank Street. We always appreciate our great sponsors on this show, and by helping them, you're directly helping us here at Locked On Senators. Pamo, I like the question mark at the end of Go Sens Go. Very fair. Brady Tkachuk, by the way, first time this season and beyond, no points in his last 4 games now. For the captain. So we'll see if he can snap that to finish off this road trip. For Brandon Piller and Jack Richardson, I'm Ross Levitan. You've been listening to the Postcast presented by the Locked On Senators podcast and the Glebe Central Pub.